All right, we're off and rolling on the Krueger Show, everybody. Friday, 10:45. Well, 10:50. We're 5 minutes behind. But welcome to the Krueger Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code KRUEG, K-R-U-E-G, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And, of course, we're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Check them out along the Monterey Peninsula. I don't have their phone number in front of me right now, but check them out. 831-521-5164, something like that, I believe. I've said it many, many times, but I don't have it in front of me. But thanks to Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles for sponsoring the Krueger Show as well. Chase Sr. in the house, one of our favorite segments of the week, Friday morning. What's up, Chase? How are you, man?
Doing well. It's been a busy week for me, obviously, with all of the Brandon Aiyuk updates and all of the reports that have come out, the meeting on Monday, him flying to the Bay Area on Sunday, and I've covered that story every step of the way throughout this week. We have another step in that process today because Brandon Aiyuk posted another Instagram story of him driving into the facility, rocking out to some music, and then this week, NBA draft, NBA free agency begins on Sunday. And I also, in addition to my duties covering the NFL, covering the Niners, talk NBA here. So it's been a nonstop week for the end of June. And then the early portion of July is going to be really busy, a little bit of a lull, and then training camp at the end of July for San Francisco. Can't wait.
Yeah, we'll get a couple thoughts from you at some point here before we say goodbye on the NBA draft. But let's talk Niners here. What did you make of the meeting that Aiyuk had with the Niners? One of the little tidbits in there was that they were going to kind of clear the air on things that had been said. What's your guess on what needed to be, at least clarified from the two sides when they talked face to face?
Yeah, we kind of got an indication that maybe something was brewing on Sunday because Brandon Aiyuk posted an Instagram story. He was on a private jet. His son was, funny enough, passed out right in front of him. They looked very comfortable, legs stretched out, laid back in some really comfortable reclining chairs. And the geotag, meaning the location, that's the new hip word on Instagram, said Bay Area. And you think about the timing of that. OTAs and minicamp are well in the rear view. The Niners as a team don't meet until the end of July. So you had an indication, is Brandon Aiyuk flying to the Bay Area and posting about it, giving us some clues that maybe a contract is going to get done at some point this week. And then on Monday, we found out why. Ryan Clark, former safety for the Steelers, for Washington, now an ESPN NFL analyst, reported after having Brandon Aiyuk on his podcast, The Pivot, that Aiyuk was in the Bay Area because him and his agent, Ryan Williams of Athletes First, set up a meeting with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. We didn't know how that went. And then 2 days later, we had the report from Tom Pelissero that it went well. Both sides said things that needed to be said. And I thought that was a positive step in the right direction. Obviously, they're still at an impasse because the deal hasn't gotten done. But Larry, you and I have worked for bosses we might not necessarily like, and we've worked with coworkers who we don't necessarily like. I don't know about you. I'm not really going to go out of my way to talk to a boss who I don't really like or hang out with coworkers who I don't like. So I thought it was a step in the right direction as well, that they were at least at a point in their relationship where things are amicable, they're friendly, and they can sit down and have a grown-up, mature, real, honest conversation about where things are, hash some things out, and both sides can probably share their points of view. I think today in America, we're certainly not doing that enough. So for them to actually have a face-to-face conversation and for Brandon Aiyuk to not demand a trade, because that's part of this meeting as well, all of that is good. And today, he posts that he's driving to the facility. So could a deal be in the works over the next couple of days, another meeting, or is he just getting a workout at the facility?
Well, my guess is if he's there, he's probably there to sign. That would be my guess. Joe D says, I think he'll sign today, or why post anything? I don't know. I mean, he's been very cryptic. He's thrown a lot of things out there. It's kind of in Aiyuk's interest to keep this thing on the front burner in the fans' consciousness because he doesn't have a lot of leverage or cards to play here. So the only way he can make this in any way kind of a burning issue in Ninerland is to keep posting on social media.
Yeah.
So I think that's, why we're seeing that. By the way, Frank Tom Ocean, he says, missed my super chat last night, Larry. Hey, Frank, I apologize, bro. I absolutely did not see it. I don't know about you, but I take every one of those super chats very, very seriously. So I apologize, bro. I didn't mean to miss it. It might have snuck through the cracks, but I appreciate you nonetheless. What do you think? I mean, my guess is, we're hearing that the Silver said the Niners offer is 26 million. That's the only thing that we really have to go on. That, and we know that Justin Jefferson got 35 million, and we know Aiyuk's going to be south of that. So we kind of have a ceiling, and the ceiling's probably quite a bit higher than where Aiyuk's going to land. But we also know what the Niners have probably offered, because I think Silver's reporting at 26 million is probably accurate.
Yeah.
I get a feeling that if it's closer to 26 million than 35, the Niners will win. If it's north of 30, I think Aiyuk in his side technically you could chalk that up as a win. But if you said what's it going to be, I would say the compromise is 28 AAV, 29 AAV, 75 to 80 million guaranteed, maybe 40 to 50 fully guaranteed, something along those lines. I mean, is that kind of what you're expecting as well? I mean, we're all just kind of reading the tea leaves. I have no sources on this. I'm just trying to kind of put together what I've read, my kind of sense of it is.
It's pretty wild how much the wide receiver market has been reset just this offseason alone. And it reminds me of what happened a couple of years ago. If you remember when Christian Kirk got a huge bag from Jacksonville after leaving Arizona. And in turn, after he got paid, because he's not looked at as a true number one or an elite wideout, all these other wide receivers started to get paid, and they continued to reset the market. But I don't think it's been as active as it's been this offseason, because I went back and looked at my first Brandon Aiyuk contract projection all the way back in March or April, and I had him making $26 million per year, because at the time I thought that was really good money. At the time, it was top 5 wide receiver money, average annual value. But then we've seen this flurry of contracts happen at the wide receiver position this offseason, and the market has continued to reset. And in turn, I think that is naturally just driven up Brandon Aiyuk's price tag. Whereas if after the Super Bowl, the Niners would have signed him to a deal giving him $26 million per year, really good guaranteed money, he would have signed it. But you look at the average AAV for the top wideouts in the game right now, you have Justin Jefferson at 35. And I thought that just naturally brought the price tag up for Aiyuk, because he's not a Justin Jefferson as far as production, him being that player. But Justin Jefferson also has a bunch of more targets, and Aiyuk can say, well, if he gets 35, I'm not to that level, but I'm worth $30 million per year, especially if Jamar Chase and CD Lamb end up getting 32, 33. So I think he has an argument there, but Jefferson is at 35 per. AJ Brown's at 32, Tyreek Hill at 30, and then you start to enter the territory where I think Aiyuk belongs. Amon-Ra St. Brown is at 30, Jalen Waddle 28.25, Devontae Adams at 28. Then you have Cooper Kupp at 26.7, Devontae Smith at 25, Nico Collins at 24.25, and DK Metcalf at 24, which has ended up being a bargain at this point for him in Seattle. So I think that Aiyuk is well worth $28 million. I don't think he's quite at 30, and I don't think he's as low as 26. And if a deal were to get done, I think what it comes down to, Niners have to go up from that 26 number. And if the number is 30 for Aiyuk, he comes down to about 28. And then quickly, Larry, obviously guaranteed money is going to play a big role in this too. Jefferson got 110, AJ Brown 84, Amon-Ra St. Brown 77.7, Jalen Waddle at 76, Cooper Kupp at 75, Tyreek Hill at 72.2. 10th is Deebo Samuel at 58. And that's an important number, because Aiyuk wants more in AAV than Deebo and more in guaranteed money. So I think that price is anywhere from 60 to, could it be up there with Amon-Ra St. Brown at 77.7?
Is an Aiyuk signing going to spur a Deebo trade before the season? And the only reason I bring this up is Albert Breer keeps banging on this door that, the Deebo trade possibility is still very much on the table. And yet I've gotten the feeling that it seems like the Niners seem like they've already made their decision there, and that they want to go forward this year with both Aiyuk and Deebo. who's right? Is Breer right? Am I right? Is Deebo here this year, or you think Deebo is here only until Aiyuk signs, and then maybe Deebo's gone?
I've kind of taken this stance ever since the Niners lost the Super Bowl. I always thought that they were going to run it back with this team, and they're really going to try to capitalize on Brock Purdy being on that rookie deal. Keep in mind that they're top 6 in cap space right now, so they have plenty of money right now that they can roll over toward next year. But I think that they understand that they're so close. They've been to 3 straight NFC championship games. Brock Purdy was awesome in replacing Garoppolo. He was excellent last year, top 5 in MVP voting, top 10 in every major statistical category pretty much. And they get it where they look at the offense. It's a special unit. They averaged nearly 30 points per game last year. Continuity matters. Fit matters. They have a defense that is also extremely talented. ESPN this week ranked every single roster in the NFL. They had the Niners at number 1. They had their biggest strength as their offensive skill players. Why not run it back with this whole collection of really special players for this year when you can afford it, while Brock Purdy's on his rookie contract? And then when you give him that new deal next offseason and you factor in potentially a new Aiyuk contract, that's when you look at the roster and you say, okay, are we going to have to make another Eric Armstead type of move where we let a veteran go who's been very highly valued by us, very well respected by this organization, has been here for a while, been a marquee player for us in this league, a team captain, but this is the reality. We've got to finagle the cap, and we've got to massage the salary cap and the financial implications of this roster, because this team is getting a little bit older and the roster is getting increasingly expensive. You have to think that the salary cap is going to continue to go up, but how is this DirecTV Sunday ticket going to impact the cap down the road, which organizations might be thinking about and having some foresight into right now? So I think they run it back. That's been my prediction all along. I think Aiyuk signs, and then next offseason, you see maybe some significant changes depending on what happens this year for the Niners. If they win the Super Bowl, it's completely easy to just have that reset. If they get close again and narrowly lose emotionally, it's going to involve some hard decisions.
It's really interesting. The whole thing is very, very interesting. And then it kind of makes you wonder too. It's like, some receiver most likely is going to get traded. I mean, they're not cutting all these guys. No. Somebody's going to get traded. Now, I don't know if it's going to be Aiyuk or Deebo, but it might be Ronnie Bell. It might be Danny Gray. I could see, I mean, there's only so many receiver spots. One goes to Aiyuk, one goes to Deebo, one goes to Pearsall, one goes to Cowing, one goes to JJ. All right. Those are 5 right there.
You have one more spot.
Maybe one more spot, maybe not. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, they also have a lot of running backs. So, if they have one more spot, does it go to Ronnie Bell? Does it go to Trent Taylor, Danny Gray, Chris Conley? I think Chris Conley might be the guy who that spot goes to, the way he played on special teams in the Super Bowl. But I mean, to me, I think there's probably a trade coming, even if it doesn't involve Aiyuk or Deebo. Two chats that I think are good chats here I want to throw in. Dean Davis Jr. says, let him play on the 5th-year option, get a year of development for the younger receivers, franchise tag him next year, ship him to New England for Christian Gonzalez and a 2nd rounder. That would be intriguing. I mean, that would be a great trade too. Christian Gonzalez and a 2nd rounder. That, with New England being as bad as they are, you're talking about Christian Gonzalez in like the 35th pick overall, for Aiyuk. So, and that's after this year. I mean, that's a good one. Here's another interesting one. From Blood Moon. He says he's clearing out his locker since he knows a trade is happening. He was wearing a Pittsburgh Pirates hat. Ha, ha, ha. He did seem, I'll say this.
Didn't seem happy.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I thought he seemed kind of edgy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, open the damn gate.
Yep.
This is my, did he say this is my house, or this is my
Something
place?
Like that.
This is my whatever. Maybe he's talking about the song. I don't know, but what do you make of the Pittsburgh? I mean, I get the sense that Aiyuk loves jerking everybody's chain. He loves playing these games, but every time he does something, we try to read into it. Oh, Jaden Daniels, what did it mean? Is he going to the Commanders? Oh, he tweeted to Mike Tomlin he wants to go to the Steelers. The Steeler Nation just has been all over this story in the offseason, and they seem to maintain that they really believe it's going to happen. I don't know if they have credible sources. I don't know Andrew Fittipaldo or his show in Pittsburgh. But what do you make of the Pirates hat? Is it possible that Blood Moon's right that he's really just there to clean out his stuff and maybe this is not coming to a head as far as he's going to sign? Maybe it's coming to a head that he's departing. What I mean, they've already kind of said they're not looking to trade him,
right?
But I don't know what to believe at this point.
Yeah, I threw you the link for that Instagram story, Larry, in the private chat here on StreamYard. I don't know how you usually play those videos, but if you find a way to fetch that link, you can show it to the people if you want. But I don't make much of athletes wearing other teams' hats. I mean, it's a style thing, right? Like, I love wearing all types of hats. Now, of course, I feel weird when I wear another team's hat as compared to the teams that I grew up rooting for. But at the same time, if it matches my outfit and it looks fresh, then I'm going to put it on, right? So Aiyuk wearing a Pittsburgh hat, I don't make too much of it. I will say, I think the Pittsburgh uniforms, the logo, the colors, black and yellow, they're really fresh. And if you ever want to go on a road trip to watch a baseball game, PNC Park in Pittsburgh is one of the best parks in Major League Baseball. So
right there on the Allegheny, right?
Yeah, right on the river with the bridges and the skyline in the background. So I don't make much of that, but I thought you brought up a good point. Like, Aiyuk didn't seem, oh, I'm going to sign a contract. Let's go. I'm getting my bag.
Seemed
He's
kind of
blaring
edgy.
music, listening to music, and he's like, open the gate. And I wouldn't drive to my workplace if I was happy and be like, open the gate right now. Let's go. Unless I'm just jacked up from the song that he was listening to, which is a possibility as well.
Yeah, and I do have, I've already retweeted it, so I also have my Twitter up. But the only reason I'm not going to play it is it had some music in it, and I don't want to demonetize the whole thing.
True.
Especially with Kev hanging out in Europe.
Could you mute it? You can mute it, right, when you share the screen?
Yeah, I can mute it. Let me see. Maybe I can do it here.
And the people will see that when he approaches the gate, he just is like, he yells, he's like, open the gate.
Okay, hold on a second.
But that's smart. That's smart by you. You can't get demonetized with the music. YouTube will just
so here it is.
Quick.
I know, seriously. Well, and you can do other things to wipe it off and this and that, but Kev being in Paris right now with his girl, it's like not easy to do. But here, I'm going to share the screen.
Dad, I went to go pop up the channel in Paris and it was gone. What happened? What'd you do?
Wait a second. Keep that volume down. Hold on.
I'll keep talking until you turn it down. There we go.
There we go. Now we got it down. So now I'll roll it and we can take a look. People are like, you coming back, bro? Commanders, new commander.
Levi's right there.
Yep. He's driving past Levi's. He's got, I'm not sure what kind of ride he's got, but it looks pretty nice.
Pittsburgh
Pirates hat. He's got the Pirates hat with the sticker on the inside part of the thing, inside part of the bill, and it's the hat's riding high.
The thing is, he's also live on this. So this is a live Instagram feed right now because you see the comments coming in.
Right. So people are like, stay in San Francisco, stay faithful. Oh, man. So what is this? Are we looking at a guy who's on his way to Pittsburgh and cleaning out his locker? Or are we looking at a guy who just talked to Lynch and Shanahan and is just coming in to sign his paperwork? My guess is it's one of the two, but something tells me, those are not necessarily, there's two diametric opposites there as far as what could be going on, but I don't know what to read.
Look, when you have a meeting like this, I talked about this earlier this week, like what could come out of this meeting, right? Aiyuk could demand a trade or request a trade like Deebo Samuel did because Ryan Clark said he was taking all of this personal. The Niners could give Aiyuk permission to seek a trade, which is different than demanding a trade. In turn, the NFL verbiage for that is, okay, if I'm John Lynch, I can say to Aiyuk and his agent, we're not going to trade you. You haven't demanded a trade, but we'll give you permission to seek one, meaning you can put some feelers out there to see which teams are willing to trade for you and pay you. That's also an option. Nothing at all could happen from this because there's a month to go until training camp. I could also see Aiyuk saying, I love ball. I want to be here. I don't want to miss time. So let's get a deal done. And the Niners can say, well, that's great. We want to get a deal done too, but at our price, not your price. And of note, Tom Pelissero said the other day, Aiyuk did not demand a trade, so we can cross that off from that list.
We got a couple of interesting ones here. Zuka says BA getting traded. So that's what his take is. And then we've got Strawberry React saying Zuka is wishing that he'll be traded. Maybe Zuka is a Steeler fan. We also have this one super from Blood Moon, who's getting off a bunch this morning. He says BA will get the bag, but greed for a bigger bag will be on a team with no ring in sight. $26 million a year is still a ton of money. BA needs to think money or ring. So he thinks. Okay, so he thinks that he wants to. I mean, that's kind of the ultimate question right there. Does BA just want to be taken care of and get a big bag, or does he want the biggest bag? Would he rather be on the Niners with a big bag or on a team that's not quite the Niners Super Bowl contender status wise, but gets the biggest bag?
Yeah,
that's the question.
I grew up idolizing in sports broadcasting. I've wanted to be a sports broadcaster since I was 5, and I grew up idolizing Colin Cowherd, Scott Van Pelt, Rich Eisen, Dan Patrick. And a reason why I like them is because they did radio and television, but also I thought they did such a great job and do such a great job now, because they're still legends in this business, of making real life comparisons to professional sports. And I think it's easy to be able to be employed in whatever job that we're in, right? But then kind of look at it from a business standpoint with professional sports, because people oftentimes lose sight of professional sports being a business, right? So I thought about it this way a little bit earlier this week. Like, I came to Chat Sports in 2021. I absolutely love working here. This job has changed my life. I love who I work for, who I work with, where I live right now. The job
That's not what you were telling me. Oh, no.
The job that I have is absolutely incredible. And like, I'm taken care of financially. I'm able to talk about what I want to talk about every single day. I've helped build the company. All of it has been incredible, right? And with that being said, another company could come to me with a really big offer, but it could be a really crappy job, especially in today's media landscape. I don't really care about the money. If I'm doing what I love here and I love who I'm working for, who I'm working with, and we're winning and we're building the company and the 49ers report is growing and we're getting crazy views and I'm getting taken care of for what I want financially, I'm fine. And for Aiyuk, I'd rather get paid, of course, and get that new deal, because he has 1 year left. He's emerged as a top 10 wide receiver. He feels as though that he should be compensated. He should be compensated. But don't you also love playing for a team that has all of these future All-Pros and Hall of Famers, Kyle Shanahan as your head coach? You know what you have in your quarterback, because your numbers have been incredible with Brock Purdy as the quarterback. You've been to 3 straight NFC titles. You play for a powerhouse brand. You can't write the history of the NFL without the Niners. They're so close to winning a Super Bowl. You're already a legend here, and you're going to get paid. So what really is the difference between 28 million and 30 million? Is it bragging rights? Yeah, it might be bragging rights, but wouldn't you rather be making 28 on a really good team where you know that you're always going to have really good production with Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, and these weapons? You're going to win. You're going to be happy, instead of being with an organization where you're frustrated on the sideline because you have shitty quarterback play. They can't get you the rock. Your numbers suffer. But at the end of the day, okay, you're getting paid, but I'd rather be happy, because I do think that quality of life is really important. And I hope that Aiyuk sees that as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many different ways to kind of view this thing. And I don't know what motivates Brandon. Hopefully this thing gets done. Since you do cover the Eagles, I'm looking online right now and I'm seeing a story about Johnny Wilson, the former Florida State wide receiver. He's almost like a tight end, really. I mean, he's 6'7", 240, but he ran 4.53 at the combine. How's he looking, by the way? I mean, the article says Eagles monstrous 6'7" receiver could make a big impact. It's a story by a guy named Matthew Schmidt, NFL Analysis Network. What are you hearing? What's the talk in Philly as far as their off season? Is this the guy they're hot to trot on that they picked? I mean, who's getting the buzz in on the Philly side in the off season?
Yeah, well, talking specifically about Johnny Wilson, he's the tallest wide receiver in the NFL, actually, at 6'7", 237 pounds. And when you see a player like that at the wideout spot and make a couple of plays, you're like, oh my goodness, that's going to translate to the NFL level. For him at Florida State, a couple of things. He struggled with some soft tissue injuries. He played way smaller than the tantalizing size of 6'7", 237. He struggled with drops. He's a little bit of a sloppy route runner. And so that's going to be a developmental type of project where the Eagles are going to have to tap into that physical upside and teach him some of the fine-tuned mechanics of being a wide receiver as far as getting in and out of breaks, high-pointing footballs, playing a little bit bigger. And look, some players, when they go from college to the NFL, they're not going to match up physically, and they're a little bit too soft for the NFL. That's okay. It's really difficult to make it to that level, but it's feast or famine at the NFL level. I thought in the pre-draft process, this was pretty notable from former All-Pro wide receiver Steve Smith, who's on the NFL Network. He said about Johnny Wilson, quote, "That boy can't chew gum and tie his shoes at the same time. He's struggling. When you look at the size, 6'7", 237, we hear this word. We heard it about a lot of people. He's a freak. Maybe at night, but it ain't on the football field. I'm just telling you." Steve Smith doesn't like Johnny Wilson at all, but I'll take a shot on a guy in, I think, the 6th round with that size.
Yeah, I mean, there's some drops there. Some drops there, but I was interested to see if he was going to find himself because he's a huge talent. There's no question about it. Love Steve Smith, by the way. Mitchell and Ness says if BA can get 150 targets, he'll be the best wide receiver since Jerry Rice. Yeah, I said it. It's interesting that he does say that because I thought the stat that was so interesting was looking at the stat that I'm sure you saw as well on who had the most 20-yard receptions last year, and it was Tyreek Hill, but he did it. He had 29. CeeDee Lamb also had 29, but they had Tyreek had 171 targets. Lamb had 181 targets. Aiyuk had 28, so he had one less than them, but he did it in 105 targets. So, I mean, in a way, Aiyuk's efficiency is just, you could argue just based on that stat that Aiyuk is one of the most efficient downfield receivers in the entire league.
Yeah, and you and I think, both talked about that Warren Sharp tweet, and he was talking about the usage between like Justin Jefferson and Brandon Aiyuk. And it's so funny when I look at the comment section for my posts and my videos and my content on YouTube, X, and Instagram, where I've said, like, Brandon Aiyuk, I think there's an argument to be made that he's a better wide receiver than Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he deserves this amount of money. And people are always like, well, look at his stats. His stats aren't even close to some of these players. My counter to that, look at the targets, because Brandon Aiyuk plays in a run-heavy scheme, and he gets far less receiving targets because the Niners don't throw the ball as much as compared to these other teams. And I have what Warren Sharp said. I think you tweeted it out too, Larry. Here's what Sharp said. Important context if you're comparing Aiyuk stats to other wide receivers. Since trading for Christian McCaffrey, the Niners throw the ball at the 32nd rate in the NFL. That's last.
Yeah.
And they pass on only 51.8% of their offensive snaps. And they've called 1,643 offensive snaps. That's 28th in the NFL. And then furthermore, you compare that to Justin Jefferson. Minnesota is number 2 in pass rate at 65.9% and number 4 in total offensive snaps. And Aiyuk, he has stats for a wide receiver, 32nd pass rate and 28 in total snaps. So it's so hard to gauge like what Aiyuk would be able to do if he got more targets, but people have a valid point. I think his numbers would be terrific because he's an all-around route runner. He has really good footwork. He has separation skills. He was number 2 in yards per catch, 20-plus yard receptions. He was there, and people try to tell me that he's not a deep threat. He was all last year, but he has everything to his route tree, and he's also a goal line to goal line wide receiver, and you can use him in the red zone. You can't say that about all wideouts.
Yeah, no, he's a unique player. I mean, this guy lives to block downfield. He doesn't complain at his locker when he doesn't get the ball. And I just think when you factor in every factor from contract cost, durability, body type, health, blocking in the run game, all these extra elements, I think you could make a really compelling argument that Brandon Aiyuk is maybe the ideal wide receiver for the 49ers. So for them to let this guy out the door, God, to me, that would seem short-sighted, especially inside their Super Bowl window. But they're playing hardball, and that's just the way it's going to go. How about Elijah Mitchell in the Niner running back situation? McCaffrey obviously is the MVP, candidate. And now you got Jordan Mason and you got Elijah Mitchell. And now you've added Isaac Guerendo. And by the way, you've added Schrader from Missouri, who really has looked good. Who's going to be the run? I mean, the Niners, if people are talking about, well, there's a 6 wide receiver. Most teams carry a combination of 10 wide receivers and running backs.
Yep.
So it's usually 5 and 5. We'll keep 5 receivers, 5 running backs, especially when you got a fullback. So it's really 4 running backs and juice.
Yep.
So either something's got to give. I mean, you got Pearsall, you got Cowing, you got your 3 incumbents. That's 5 receivers right there. So, and then running back wise, CMC, Mason, Mitchell, Juice, Guerendo. That's 5.
Yep.
But then Cody Schrader, I think, is really, really good. So that's 6. So, I mean, is there somebody's going to get squeezed? There's probably going to be, just based on what I can tell, unless there's injuries, and there always is something, but we can't necessarily project that. If without projecting an injury, give me your running back that gets traded or your wide receiver that gets traded, because to me, almost all these guys are too good to cut. I think, you might be able to cut Cody Schrader, but I wouldn't cut Elijah Mitchell, and I wouldn't cut Jordan Mason. And receiver wise, I don't know that I would cut, some of the guys that they have outside of their top 5. Who's going to get squeezed out, if in your mind, at running back or wide receiver?
Yeah, you make a good point as far as accumulating the roster numbers and including Kyle Juszczyk, because that takes pretty much a running back away from there being 5 running backs on the team, because you have to carry the fullback. So 4 running backs, those are the 4 allotted spots for this position group. And I think it's going to be a really, really good training camp battle, in addition to backup defensive end and defensive tackle, linebacker 3, corner. And I think safety is pretty much set in stone, but we'll see what happens with Talanoa Hufanga's recovery. And then wide receiver is an incredible roster battle as far as who makes that 5th and or 6th spot. So with Elijah Mitchell, I've talked about him as one of my surprise candidates on the show, and it's not for the lack of ability. I think that Elijah Mitchell's been a really good player in his career. He's played 27 games and he's averaged 5.5 yards per carry. He's been very productive, but he's been productive when he's been available. And we all know the saying, you can't make the club from the tub. And Elijah Mitchell has literally been injured every single year that he's been in the NFL. He had a great rookie campaign in 2021 for that team that made that late surge and made it to the NFC Championship game before losing to the Rams. He only played 11 games that year. Now his numbers, 207 carries, 963 yards. And I'm sorry, the career yards per carry is at 4.7. He averaged 4.7 that year, but he only played 11 games. Following year, he played 5. And then this year, he played 11. So I always think that when you talk about players who might get traded or might get cut, look at the team's actions. Look at a person's actions. What have they done? Because that tells a story. And after 2021, you're thinking, man, if Elijah Mitchell can stay healthy, could he be a feature back in Kyle Shanahan's offense? He gets hurt. What do the Niners do? They trade for Christian McCaffrey. And then what did they do this offseason? They traded up for Isaac Guerendo. They signed Cody Schrader as a UDFA. They like Jordan Mason, even though I hope that they can trust him a little bit more to give him more carries. But this offseason, it looks as though he's added pass catching to his arsenal. And Elijah Mitchell last year, I thought he just looked slow. He didn't have the explosion, the speed, or the giddy up that I saw as a rookie, and have all of those injuries kind of caught up to him, because he's what you call a high runner, which then he's susceptible to getting hit on his lower half. And I think that's why he suffered some of these knee injuries. That's the one that knocked him out against Chicago in week 1 back in his sophomore campaign in 2022. So with this running back room, if Elijah Mitchell doesn't look the same athletically and he continues to get hurt, what is the point of having him on this team when You have Jordan Mason, who's that physical back, who's the thunder to the lightning that is Christian McCaffrey. You traded up for Isaac Guerendo, and he's a guy with an incredible skill set who had a relative athletic score grade of 999, who's 6', 221, a 41.5-inch vertical, who ran a 4.33 40-yard dash. And then Cody Schrader doesn't have the athletic traits, not even close, but he's just a grinder. And I think that this Niners coaching staff could really fall in love with him. So the Niners actions, I think, has spoken loudly with their concerns about Elijah Mitchell for the past 2 years. And if he gets cut, I won't be surprised all too much.
Yeah, one of the interesting articles I stumbled onto this morning was potential surprise cut candidates for all 32 teams, NFL teams ahead of training camp. And of course, the important dates to remember, teams are going to pare their roster down 3 p.m. Central Time on August 27th. The clubs have to clear their roster from 90-man camp rosters to 53-man active rosters. So that's the key date. That's cut down day in the NFL, August the 27th. The NFL trade deadline, by the way, coming up this year on November the 5th. So it's not until early November. But this is interesting, and this is an article about potential surprise cuts for every team. And I wanted to see who they had for the Niners, and sure enough, they have Elijah Mitchell. And, they're basically just, Nicholas McGee, the beat writer, who's the guy who chose Mitchell. And I know Nicholas, and he's a good guy and a good writer. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we basically just kind of summing up what you just basically said right there about Mitchell, that, there's other guys now, and you've got Guerendo, and you got Schrader, and you got McCaffrey, and you still got Juice. And, there's only so many spots on the roster at running back. You're not going to go. How did
Patrick Taylor look this offseason, by the way?
I thought he looked great.
Yeah. So that's another guy who we haven't even mentioned.
Yeah. I mean,
and he
when
can
I
play
say great,
teams, by the way.
He is a tremendous athlete. You're talking about a 6'3". He kind of reminds me of, remember the back when the Packers won the Super Bowl, they had named James Starks.
Yep.
He reminds me a little bit of James Starks in that he runs kind of upright. He's tall. He's super uber athletic. Like a very impressive athlete to see on the practice field. Yeah. So, I mean, we didn't even thought about him. We didn't even mention him.
Yeah.
So, So, I mean, they're loaded at running back. Okay, but here's the list, and I'm looking at this list of guys who could be, cut at the end of camp, in August, and it's an interesting list. And I'll just throw out some of the interesting names and some of the names I could see matching the Niners, or I'd be interested in. I mean, Khalil Herbert from the Bears. I mean, I think that's a pretty good player right there. I'm not saying for the Niners, but just I think he's a pretty good running back. If I'm Dallas, I'd be all over Khalil Herbert. The Bengals edge rusher, Joseph Osai, who played at Texas and had that hit on Mahomes in the playoff game, out of bounds. Remember that hit?
Yep.
He was, he's interesting. They're saying he might be expendable in Cincinnati. If I'm the Niners, you got Drake Jackson, you got Robert Beal, but Joseph Osai is probably better than them. So that's an interesting one. Couple others that are interesting. They're saying the Bucs may cut Kyle Trask. Cardinals may cut the running back Michael Carter, liked him in college. Chiefs may cut McCole Hardman, they're saying. How about this one? The Colts, they say, may cut Mo Alley Cox. Mo Alley Cox might be a better tight end than the Niners have.
Yep.
Outside of Kittle, right? That would be interesting.
I think I saw Schuster on that list too.
Yeah. Here's the guy that the Eagles used to have. Didn't the Eagles used to have the wide receiver Olamide Zacchaeus?
Olamide Zacchaeus. Yeah.
Yeah. He's now with the Commanders.
Yep.
But, he's an interesting receiver. They say the Cowboys may cut Deuce Vaughn, who's a interesting little special teamer. Jeff Wilson, the former Niner, they're saying maybe gets cut in Miami. They're saying James Bradbury maybe gets cut in Philly. Is that going to happen, Chase?
Yeah, that could happen just because they're really deep at corner.
Especially now they got Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean.
Yep.
Here's another one. Falcons may cut safety Richie Grant. Richie Grant's a good player, man. I would take Richie Grant for the Niners in a second.
I think they need to add a safety.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm going to ask you one about that in a second, but Giants also, they say, may cut wide receiver Isaiah Hodgins, who's, not the greatest runner. And now they added Neighbors and they've got depth there. But, guy like that is a really dependable possession receiver. He's from the Bay Area. He went to Berean High School about a mile from where I'm sitting right now. And he's a 6'4" receiver with great hands. I mean, if I'm the 49ers, I would love to have Isaiah Hodgins as a red zone threat, big receiver with hands like that. The Jaguars have a safety, Andrew Wingard, who they say may get cut. The Jets running back, Izzy Abanaconda. I loved Izzy. He got hurt. We saw it last year in Hard Knocks, but Izzy is a big-time back. He was a really good player. At Pittsburgh, I believe, in college. John Kaminsky, the edge rusher for the Lions, is on this list. A.J. Dillon, the running back for the Packers. Miles Sanders, the running back for Carolina. Juju, as you said, Smith-Schuster. There, Joe Notaboom, the Rams offensive tackle. Some interesting guys. The ones, though, that really are interesting down the list here. The Saints, they say, may cut Isaiah Foskey. Now, if I'm the 49ers, before Isaiah Foskey gets cut, I would offer a day 3 pick for Isaiah Foskey. He's 23. He was their second-round pick in last year's draft. They signed Chase Young to come off the edge. They also have Peyton Turner, and they got a bunch of other guys there, Granderson. And if Foskey gets cut, he's a guy that I absolutely would want. And then the other guy is the Seahawks. They say may cut their edge rusher, Darrell Taylor, who I loved at Tennessee. If he gets cut, I'd probably try to get him. And then the Steelers, they say may cut offensive tackle Dan Moore. And Dan Moore might be better than Jalen Moore as far as offensive tackles go. I mean, if I'm the Niners, I'd be interested. Of those names, is there one that intrigues you?
I'm always willing to take a shot on a player who had a high draft pedigree. They had a high draft pedigree for a reason, and especially along the defensive line where I think the Niners could use another edge. Maybe Robert Beal can have a really big year this year and be one of those breakout candidates. That would help you there, but Leonard Floyd's a little bit older. Yetur Gross-Matos is unproven. Drake Jackson coming off the big injury. So Isaiah Foskey is a guy who I looked at in the pre-draft process last year, who was the 40th overall pick out of Notre Dame. And
came to the Niners local pro day. He's from, he went to De La Salle. He's from,
De La Salle, Concord, California. He was really highly touted coming out of high school. He played in the All-American Bowl. And that's a player that I would like to take a shot on because you think about what Chris Kosaric would be able to do with a player like that and what he's done with these types of players. Last year, Cleveland Ferrell. And then before that, I thought he did a great job of maximizing Arden Key. He got paid elsewhere. Charles Omenihu, he got a bag from the Kansas City Chiefs. So Isaiah Foskey and John Kaminsky are the two players that kind of stand out to me on that list because I never think that you can have enough edge rushers.
Yeah, it's a good call. Albert Breer has an article out saying that the Niners ought to consider Justin Simmons, who went to the Pro Bowl. And the safety is clearly a need spot for the 49ers, and they could definitely use another player, especially with, Hufanga being somewhat of an unknown. But I'll tell you, I read an article last week coming out of Minnesota that I thought was really intriguing, and that is Lewis Cine, who played at Georgia.
Yep.
Which I'm surprised he's not a Philadelphia Eagle, right? Because it seems like they go for every Georgia player.
Yeah.
But Lewis Cine got drafted by Minnesota, I think second-round pick. I loved Lewis Cine at Georgia. He's a hitter. He won a national championship there. He just was an impact guy. They're saying that that Cine, if you look at the Viking depth chart, is buried on their depth chart and maybe a guy who's going to get cut at the cut down. Like their number one free safety is Cam Bynum. Their number one strong safety is Harrison Smith. But now their number two, their second rated, their second team group is Jay Ward and Theo Jackson. And Lewis Cine is their fifth safety on the list. And they're saying that he may get cut at the cut down. I know he broke his leg. He had a surgery on it. So there's that concern. How did he bounce back from that thing? But this guy, he was a first-round pick. This guy wasn't even a second-round pick. They took Lewis Cine in the first round.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, I love Justin Simmons and I love Budda Baker, and we've talked about a lot of these guys. But if a guy like Cine, if you could get him at the cut down or get him for a day 3 pick, kind of like a Laken Tomlinson trade where they traded a fifth-round pick for a guy who was drafted by the Lions in the first round a couple years earlier, I'd take a shot on Lewis Cine if I were the Niners. I mean, he's exactly the kind of piece that I would like to see them add. Not going to cost you a ton. It's kind of like low risk, potentially high reward. What do you think of Scene?
I do think that the Niners need to add a safety because they're a little bit thin there. They haven't brought back Deshaun Gibson as of right now. Talanoa Hufanga is coming off a torn ACL. Jair Brown, I thought, was really good as a rookie, and he's due for a breakout campaign as he becomes the full-time starter for the entire year going into year 2. After that, though, they extended George Odom, gave him some good money, but he's more of a special teams player. And they have Taylor Hawkins, who's a journeyman special teams player. If there were to be an injury to Talanoa Hufanga or his recovery is delayed or Jair Brown were to go down, the Niners are kind of screwed on that back end. And there are players
really
out there who can be had. Lewis Seen, Justin Simmons is still a free agent. Eddie Jackson was an All-Pro in 2018. Quandre Diggs is a player who I still think has some gas left in the tank. Lewis Seen, it's been a disastrous pick for Minnesota because they drafted him with the final pick in the 3rd round. He had 1 coverage snap in 2023, and then in his first year, he had 2 coverage snaps. So they've barely gotten anything out of him. But going back to what we were talking about with Isaiah Foskey and John Kaminsky, those are high picks, players with pedigree, players with ability. And I think a big reason why the Niners have been so good recently is their player development. They've done a really good job of scouting, coaching, developing, and really grooming these players and maximizing them. And Seen was a player who at Georgia was stellar. He was the national championship game defensive MVP back in 2022.
Right.
You have to imagine that at some point, a player is going to be able to stay healthy. I know there are players like Jason Verrett who are so snake bitten by injuries and they literally can't stay healthy. But this is still a really young player who's only 24 years old that I would like to see the Niners take a shot on in trying to develop if he were to get let go by Minnesota.
He's listed as their third-rated Vikings third-rated strong safety. Can he play the deep middle? Can he play can he cover the deep middle in a cover 3 zone? Or Niners play a lot of zone and they play a lot of cover 3 typically. Do you think that that's the question. Like, of the Niners safety group, who do you think is most ideally suited between Jair Brown, Talanoa Hufanga, and Malik Mustafa to play free safety and cover the grass and cover the deep middle and be that coverage player down the field? Or is it none of the above and it's more like somebody like Renardo Green? I mean, who's the Niners starting free safety? Because to me, it seems like Brown, Hufanga, and Mustafa all kind of pencil in as strong safeties. Am I seeing that right?
No, you're right. And bad job by me for not mentioning Malik Mustafa when we were talking about the safety spot. I really liked him as a prospect coming out of Wake Forest, and I was happy that the Niners signed him. And I talked to him at the NFL Scouting Combine, and he talked about his meeting with San Francisco and kind of what he brings to the table. Extremely high character and is just a stacked athlete. He's really maximized his frame. And the thing that is funny about Hufanga, Brown, and Mustafa, like you said, they're all like versatile safeties who have been used and utilized as kind of chess pieces on the defense. And they've been players who can play in the box, little hybrid linebacker, little slot nickel corner. They're not necessarily that traditional deep guy. If there are 2 of those 3 players who I think can serve that role, it's more Jair Brown and it's Malik Mustafa, just because they have more natural center field abilities. And I'm always an advocate of putting a player in a position to succeed. And I think part of the greatness of Talanoa Hufanga is that you can kind of put him all around the field in multiple positions and he makes plays and has such a great feel for the game. So I want to take him out. I don't want to take him out of that type of role. But that's also why there were some rumblings this offseason that the Niners were like, should we bring in a safety? We're not sure how we're going to utilize him. We might be switching defensive tendencies a little bit, and he's in the final year of his contract. So that's also as part of the overall safety positional battle. How they're used, where they're used is going to be really interesting to see under a new defensive coordinator, Nick Sorensen, come July and August.
Yeah, no question. A couple last ones before we let you go. One is, if you said who were the impact rookies last year, that kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, Puka Nacua was a 5th-round pick, and he was awesome, right? He went number 177. Rams also got great production out of Kobe Turner, the big Wake Forest defensive tackle, I believe. They got in the 3rd round, 89 overall. There was a pretty interesting article this week about some candidates around the league who could be this year's version of Puka or possibly this year's version of Kobe Turner, kind of overlook rookies who didn't go in the first round, but might really bust out in their rookie year. And so I'm reading the article, and sure enough, here it is. They're talking about Dominic Pooney. And they're saying, man, Pooney, the Kansas product, who the Niners took 51st overall, he was number 8 among interior offensive linemen drafted, that he actually, there's a lot of belief that he might be a bust-out guy. And they had a quote here from the offensive line scout, Brandon Thorne, on the former Jayhawk. He says, overall, Pooney's a strapping, powerfully built prospect with an impressive blend of girth, body control, pad level, and that unlocks jolting, sudden power on contact. He says he boasts the steer and sustained skills to compete and win a starting guard job within his first contract. He also has the ability to play tackle in a pinch. So he did play, I guess he played in a zone-based scheme at Kansas, but there was some gap, some gap concepts there as well. Obviously, Chris Forster is very high on Pooney. The Niners will probably have Pooney compete with Feliciano and Burford for that starting right guard job. What do you think, Chase? I mean, it's only June 28th. We're a month away from camp, but I would say this might be one of the real fun, position battles to watch this summer. Pooney versus Burford versus Feliciano versus Zakel or anybody else who cares to step up at right guard. What do you think? Is Pooney going to be a plug and play guy as a 3rd round draft choice at right guard, or does Burford get that gig, or is it Feliciano and they go Brendel and Feliciano and kind of go conservative with some older guys? How do you see that shaking out?
I think 3/5 of the Niners offensive line are in a cloudy spot right now, but we know who 3 starters are going to be. Trent Williams and Aaron Banks on the left side. That's a great left guard, left tackle combination. When they have shared the field together, they've given up just 1 sack. So they've been really good flanking one another on the left side. I'm not a huge Colton McKivitz fan. I think he's more of a backup swing tackle for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, but there isn't a tackle on this team that I think is capable of unseating him as a starter, because Chris Hubbard didn't show up for any OTAs. And I just don't like that as a look for a guy who maybe would have had a chance to unseat McKivitz at right tackle and has started a lot of games and has played okay at that right tackle position. Center and right guard, those are the 2 remaining positions that I haven't touched on yet. And I think there are dominoes to fall with those 2 positions. Jake Brendel has dealt with knee tendonitis this offseason. I think that he's a little bit small for the position. I think up until 2 years ago, he was a journeyman for a reason. I think he's more of a depth piece. If he doesn't claim the starting role at center, could the Niners go with Ben Barch? Could they go with the Michigan kid whose name is escaping me right now? Drake Nugent. Those are 2 options.
Drake Nugent Drake Nugent in the minicamp looked phenomenal. And when I say that, he's lifting guys off the ground. You're seeing
great leverage.
Yeah, the guy plays low and fires his hands. There was a lot to like with Drake Nugent. You can kind of tell, even without the pads, that guy's going to be a force to be, competed with this summer.
So Ben Barch and Drake Nugent are options if it's not Jake Brendel. But John Feliciano is also an option. 2 years ago, before signing with the Niners, he was the full-time starting center for the New York Giants, and he played pretty well there. And if he starts at center, then that opens up more opportunities at right guard for Spencer Burford, for Dominic Pooney, for Jarrett Kingston, because he might be a guard at the next level because him and Pooney have shorter arms. So it all kind of depends on what the Niners go with. Ultimately, I think they run it back with the same offensive line that took them to the Super Bowl, and it's Trent Williams at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard, Jake Brendel at center, John Feliciano at right guard, who played excellent last year and can play center and left guard, and then Colton McKivitz at right tackle. But if you drop Dominic Pooney in the 3rd round and he's out there pancaking dudes and he's playing well, he looks to be a scheme fit. He's agile on some of these pull blocks. He played guard at the college level. And then last year he played primarily left tackle where he didn't give up a sack. So clearly that tells me he's fleet of foot. He's athletic enough to play guard on the interior if he can hold up well on the outside at left tackle, protecting the blind side for his quarterback at Kansas. So if he plays well, how could you deny that? If Spencer Burford takes a big leap, I think the best situation for this offensive line is going with Pooney or Burford at right guard. They live up to their potential, and then move Feliciano to center, who I think is a better option as compared to Jake Brendel. So that's another one of these training camp battles that I think right now is somewhat up in the air. The Niners could be stubborn and just run it back and say, we average nearly 30 points per game with this offensive line. We are a very effective running team. Brock Purdy had an incredible year. We like continuity. That's fine, and I think the continuity certainly matters, but I want the best offensive line unit in February, not week 1. And I'm building to that throughout the season, maybe by reshuffling the deck a little bit.
If you could attend training camp, who's the 49er that you would most want to see this summer? Is there one that I mean, there's a bunch of guys. You can name 25 guys.
Yeah.
But is there somebody that you're like, man, I'm really, really curious to see player X?
Yeah, I want to get my eyes on Ricky Pearsall. I want to see if the route running, the footwork translates. I want to see that his vertical separation I thought was a little bit concerning at Florida, which is why I think he's more of an inside guy. I know he ran a 4.4, but he doesn't have that getaway speed. And does that cause problems at the next level, or does that translate to the next level where it's not as much of a weakness as I thought? I really just want to see the route running. I want to see how he holds up as an athlete because he's a little bit smaller. So that's probably the player that I'd be curious to see, because I do think as a rookie, with him manning the middle area of the field where Brock Purdy really flourishes, I think that he could have a really big role as a rookie. I also want to see the development of D. Winters and Jalen Graham. I've kind of nerded out on both of those players, and I want to see if they can maybe unseat Devondre Campbell as linebacker 3.
Yeah, for me, it's the DBs. I want to see Renardo Green.
Yeah,
I want to see Malik Mustafa. I want to see Jalen Mahoney. I've heard some good things about him. Really want to see Isaac Yadam. He's coming off a tremendous year with the Saints. I want to see Darrell Luter. I want to see Samuel Womack. So there's a bunch of young DBs, some free agents there, some existing players, some draft picks. All guys I want to see this summer. But I think if I could hang out by the DB workout and watch some of their drills, I think that's the group that I'd want to hone in on. Last one, last night was the NBA draft part 2, and I know you cover the draft and the NBA as well. What stood out to you? I mean, I know you're covering Philly. I love what the Sixers did as a team. To me, that was. I thought Philly had one of the better drafts. I mean, they got Jared McCain from Duke, who's a tremendous shooter. He's a Sacramento kid, and then Adam Bona from UCLA, who's like 6'9", but he plays like 7 feet because he's got great length and he can finish and he can jam. And he's a really exciting player. I thought Philly getting McCain and Bona, that was one of my. I thought they did as well as almost anybody. What'd you think of the draft? Anything jump out to you?
Yeah, so selfless plug, but for the Bay Area, San Francisco, and Warriors fans, I know you talked some dubs here on the channel.
Yeah.
I also host our Warriors channel here at Chat Sports. I built that channel up from like 13,000 subscribers to 60,000. And then because I was taking on more NFL duties last year, I stepped aside. But now with this huge offseason for Golden State, I'm back in the saddle. Our Quentin Post draft video yesterday did almost 50,000 views. So if you want some Warriors content from me, you can check that out. Like what Philly did, I think Jared McCain's going to be a good player. I think that you're always looking for a player in a weak draft class with an elite skill, and his elite skill is shooting, and he can really shoot from all 3 levels. He has unlimited range. He's a little bit smaller, so I worry about a small backcourt between Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey, but they could also be a really good shooting backcourt. And if you load up at the wing in free agency, you have him beat at the 5, I think he'll be pretty solid there. And then Adem Bona is a freak athlete, 40-inch vert, blocks a ton of shots. He said he modeled his game after Giannis growing up. He didn't start playing basketball till he was 13, but he can sky. So I like what they did as far as value goes. My main takeaway this was the least hyped NBA draft that I can remember. This is an event that every single summer I love watching because I've always scouted NBA prospects, and it's been my job the last couple of years in addition to the NFL duties. But this draft class was so weak. There was a lot of international players who went in the lottery, 3 Frenchmen in the first couple of picks, which was extremely rare. Not a lot of American-born talent. And then the NFL has just found a way to lap the NBA, become a nearly year-round league as far as demanding attention, and they do it well as far as a business strategy, whereas the NBA is so stupid. The NBA trade deadline is the week of the Super Bowl. What are we doing? The NBA draft now becomes 2 days, and the second day is in the afternoon. Nobody even knows about it. And then
why?
The second day, every one of the picks in the second round was traded to the point where we don't even know which team is selecting the player. And this is what drives me nuts, maybe more than anything in sports.
They're wearing the wrong
trades
hat.
that happen during the draft. And we know that the player selected is not going to that team, yet he has to walk on the stage and take a photo and do an interview in the wrong draft hat. What are we doing?
And then the panel also analyzes him on the wrong team.
Yes, it makes no sense.
Well, he's got, we expect this pick is going to Memphis, but, how he fits with the Warriors is, he's not going to be on the Warriors.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, could you imagine if the NFL draft was 7 rounds of, and the Detroit Lions pick, and it's and the guy comes out and they hand him a Lions jersey and a Lions hat and he's hugging the commissioner and this and that, but he's playing for Seattle, and then the next pick is the Niners pick, but he's playing for Denver, and the next pick's Dallas's pick, but he's playing for Green Bay, and the next pick, it would just ruin the draft. I don't understand why that you guys can't figure that part out.
Yeah, and then they have free agency starting on Sunday, right after the draft, whereas the NFL spreads it out because the demand and attention lasts longer. So that's my other takeaway, and that's my gripe with the NBA. They just don't run a business like the NFL does.
It's funny. The NFL makes the draft look so easy, and then you watch the other sports, and you remember Bud Selig when he'd be like, and the Texas Rangers are on the clock, and he would just say it like in some super awkward kind of way, and just it's like baseball doesn't understand the draft. NBA, basketball, they don't understand the draft. The NFL has turned the draft into like the Super Bowl of the off season, and there's more people that watch the NBA draft or the NFL draft than watch the NBA finals. It's
Bud Selig, if you're going to talk like that, put on bifocals and put on a top hat then,
That is awesome. What do you got cooking the rest of the day, man? Always a great stream. Tons of people in the house. Follow Chase on Chat Sports. He does a great job covering the Niners. You doing some videos today? You got some more live streams? What's cooking?
Yeah, earlier today, I talked about, it was a clip from an earlier show this week about Ben Peterson leaving strength and conditioning coach for the Atlanta Hawks. I talked about the implications of that. And I also explained why I think Brock Purdy can get better in 2024 and build off of 2023 and not regress, and the reasons behind that. Do a Brandon Aiyuk update, and then content to come throughout the weekend. And I will say I'm very competitive, Larry. So when I look at your live show feed and I see that our shows do really well, it makes me feel good. And that's why I enjoy coming on every week. And I'm glad that people respond to it very well.
Yeah, no, seriously, lots of people. If I could get everybody who watches on Twitter to also watch on YouTube, that would be better. But you know what? I'll take it anyway it comes. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle. Thanks to Chase. Peace. Have a great Friday, everybody. Have a terrific weekend. See you next week. Chase, thanks again, man.
See ya.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.